Hey, welcome to the Explainer. If you're an athlete, you know the feeling, right? You're grinding, pushing yourself to get faster, stronger, but then one little thing goes wrong and bam, you're on the sidelines. Well, today we're going to dive into the science behind workload management. And this isn't about training harder, it's about training smarter. Okay, let's just start with a number that should absolutely stop you in your tracks. 1.5 million. That's how many high school and college athletes in the US get injured playing sports every single year. I mean, that's a staggering figure, and it tells you right away there's a huge disconnect in how we're thinking about training. And it's such a frustrating cycle, isn't it? You put in all the hours, you push through the pain, you're thinking you're doing everything right to hit peak performance, and you just end up injured or sick or totally burned out. So what are we getting wrong here? Well, all that frustration leads us right to something researchers call the training paradox. It's this idea that the very thing we do to get better, training, is often the very thing that breaks us. So why is that? The thing is, it's usually not about being weak. Most of these injuries boil down to one of two things. Either you're just not prepared for the task at hand, or you're actually super fit, but you haven't given your body enough time to recover. Either way, the result's the same. Your body just can't handle the load you're asking it to. Okay, so to solve this puzzle, we've got to wrap our heads around a concept that, honestly, could change how you think about training forever. And it all comes down to understanding two different types of load. All right, so first up, you've got what's called external load. Think of this as the what. It's the physical work you actually did. The distance you ran, the weight you lifted, how many sprints you cranked out. It's the stuff you can easily write down in a logbook. But then there's internal load, and this is the how. It's your body's unique, personal response to that work. And this is affected by everything: your sleep last night, your stress from school or work, even your genetics. It's why two athletes can do the exact same workout, the same external load, and feel completely different afterwards. Their internal loads are worlds apart. Just let that sink in for a second. The external load, that's just the stimulus. It's your body's internal response that actually causes the changes that make you stronger and faster. So if you're only tracking how many miles you run or how much weight you lift, you're missing the most important part of the equation. So how in the world do you track this invisible but super important internal load? You're probably thinking you need all this fancy gear, right? Expensive heart rate monitors, GPS trackers. But nope. The most effective tool is actually incredibly simple. It's something anyone can use. It's called Session RPE. Or just SRPE for short. And this was developed by a sports scientist named Dr. Carl Foster. And it is a scientifically proven way to measure your internal load. The best part? It's beautifully simple. All it does is combine how hard a workout felt to you with how long the workout was. And this is literally the entire tool. It's that simple. About a half hour after you finish your workout, you just ask yourself one question. Overall, how hard was that? Then you just pick a number on this 0 to 10 scale. That's it. Your gut feeling is the data, and the math is just as easy. Seriously, you take that score you just gave yourself. Let's say it was a really tough session, so you give it a 7. Then you just multiply that by how long the workout was, in minutes. So if that session was an hour long, 60 minutes, your training load score is 7 times 60. That's 420. And just like that, you have a number. A real number that represents your internal load for that one workout. Okay, so you're doing this after every workout. You're getting these numbers. Now what do you do with them? Well, this data is the key to finding that perfect training sweet spot, what we're going to call the Goldilocks zone, where you're making progress without getting hurt. We do this using a metric called the acute chronic workload ratio, or ACWR. I know, it sounds super complicated, but I promise it's not. Just think of it like this. Acute load is basically your fatigue from this past week's training. Chronic load is your fitness base, which is the average of your training over the last 4 weeks. So the ACWR is just a simple ratio between your current fatigue and your overall fitness. It answers a really important question. Are you piling on more work than your body is actually prepared for? And here is what that looks like visually. The research shows this incredibly clear sweet spot. If your ratio is somewhere between 0.8 and 1.3, you're golden. You're in that Goldilocks zone with the absolute lowest risk of injury. But look what happens when that number spikes above 1.5. Boom, you are in the danger zone and your injury risk just shoots through the roof. And that spike, that's the real villain of this story. Those sudden, sharp jumps in your weekly training load, they're one of the biggest predictors of those super frustrating non-contact injuries. You know the ones, the pulled hamstrings, the sore tendons that just seem to pop up out of nowhere. And the data on this is just wild. Look at this. If you increase your weekly training load by less than 10%, your injury risk stays nice and low, right around 10%. But if you jump that weekly increase to over 15%, your risk of getting hurt can skyrocket. We're talking up to a 49% chance of injury. That is a massive, massive price to pay for what feels like just a little extra push. Okay, so how do we take all of this and actually use it to stay out of that danger zone? Let's pull it all together into a simple, actionable, smart training plan. All right, here it is, your checklist for training smarter. First, increase your weekly load gradually. Keep it under that 10% mark. Number 2, you got to avoid those big, sudden spikes in load. 3, make sure you alternate between hard, moderate, and easy days. Don't go hard all the time. 4, listen to your body and remember to manage stress from outside your sport. It all adds up. 5, and this is so key, make sure your training actually prepares you for what a real game or competition feels like. And lastly, a really critical rule for all the young athletes out there. The number of hours you train each week should not be more than your age, period. So, as we wrap this up, I want to leave you with one final question to think about. Look at your own routine. Are you just training hard, or are you training smart? Are you just counting reps and miles, or are you actually listening to what your body is trying to tell you? Because that difference, well, it's everything. Thanks for joining us.